Okay, so the first lesson in any economics course from high school up through introductory year of college is a what is economics, to define the basic vocabulary words and to say what it is as a field of study or a field of thought. And the simplest version is that economics is the study of how people and societies meet their needs and wants. In order to understand that simplest version, we have to then go into what are needs and what are wants. Well, needs, often also called necessities, needs or necessities, are things that are essential to survival. And I add acceptable survival. We'll talk about that later, but things that are essential to living. Whereas your wants or your luxuries are non-essential goods or services. Well, now we have to go deeper because we've got even more introductory economics vocabulary, goods and services. So we define them. A good is a physical object that has value. And some can argue that everything in the appropriate or certain circumstances has value. So it'd be interesting to see something without value or negative value, but the vast majority of anything in the appropriate circumstances has value. So I guess we could say, and be right almost 99% of the time, goods are physical objects. Services are actions or activities, once again, with value. So we don't have to write it down because I think it's very basic, but I will give you some examples of goods. A pizza, a pencil, a car, something you could hold, something that you could physically move, something that you could touch or that touches you. A service, being an action, would be something like a haircut or a delivery of food. The food is the physical good, the service is the delivery, but there was also a service in making the food. So their services and goods go together. We could look at teaching. Teaching is a service, but then we could go even deeper because economics is not cut and dry. Economics is a philosophy. So we could actually say, well, does teaching have goods? Well, teachers do produce a product. We produce our own intellectual property, and is that intellectual property a good? I would argue it probably is. We do have in the United States of America copyright laws. We acknowledge the fact that our ideas have value and could be goods. So it's not that the physical book is copyrighted, but the actual story itself. So what you produce could be a good too, even if it's intangible. So I would say teachers are both a service and they produce goods. So let's go back to the basic definition. We will study how people or societies can meet their needs and wants. What do people and societies need to survive? And what do they want to have in addition to survival? What goods and services do people need and want? And looking at that is economics. All right, let me react to a video of someone on the internets who tries to answer the question, what is economics? I've seen this before, so it won't be a blind reaction, but we'll still try to get some reactions to it. And here we go.
Okay, so what is economics? Economics starts with the word
scarcity. Okay, so that's something new.
What is it?
I don't know, that's why I'm listening.
Scarcity is the idea that we cannot have everything.
But I want everything.
As much as we'd like to have, there are limits that keep us from having everything. What are these limits?
A lot of questions being asked. Please tell me the answers.
Scarce resources. Why are these resources scarce?
Why are you asking questions?
Because they're hard to find. Money is a great example. Let's say you want a phone and a laptop, but you don't have enough money to buy both. You're forced to choose between
which one
the
do
two.
you choose? 3, 2, 1. Which one do you choose? Phone. Because phones can do almost everything a laptop can. If you have to buy one, choose the phone.
Even if you have enough money to buy both, you'll still have to choose between buying those things or buying
Unless you
other
have enough
stuff.
money for a motorbike.
What I'm trying to say is that you can never have enough money, which makes it a scarce resource. Time is another scarce resource. Suppose you need to work, but you also want to play on your Xbox. You can go to work, or you can play video games, but you can't do both at the same time.
Well, you could. You might get fired, but you could. You definitely could. I do not recommend it. And I'm not saying if I ever did that before in my teaching career.
Of course, you can do one after the other, but there's only 24 hours in a day.
No, that's true.
Doing one thing, you'll have to cut another thing from your schedule. So, what
Economics.
is economics?
Economics.
Economics is a study of how people make decisions,
I like
given
that.
the resources,
Decisions.
scarce resources, that are provided to them. But it's not
No, of
just
course not.
about people. It's also
Yes.
how businesses and governments make decisions as well.
Economics.
Economics is a study of how our
Yeah.
society, as a whole, uses its resources.
Not bad, plain prep. Good job. Plain prep introduced us to a couple other vocab and concepts of economics, or as they like to say, economics. And that would be of resources. So you would say, how do we produce goods and services? They don't just magically come out of thin air. No, you need air as a resource. So what we have are resources, the things that are used to make goods and services. For example, just think any raw material or anything used up in production of stuff, for example, water, or any of the power, electricity, any of the materials such as iron, such as oil. But don't just stick on the physical stuff as resources. Knowledge is a resource. You need knowledge to produce some things. Experience is a resource. Some specific words they use are human capital. Those are the workers, okay? Time and money are resources, okay? And see, resources sometimes are abundant and there's a lot of them, but they aren't unlimited. So there's this really big concept in economics of scarcity at the heart of everything. Why we can't have it all, because things and resources are scarce. And even if we have a lot of resources, the goods and services provided from those resources are scarce too, because there's always going to be a limited number of people making things or the time it takes to make things. So scarcity is a concept, a universal concept that says there's just not unlimited stuff. And because of this, what flows from this concept of scarcity, it's one half of the equation that creates value, why something has value or is expensive, okay? It is the supply part of value. If something is scarce, there's not a lot of supply. And when things aren't in supply, sometimes they are at a high cost. If there is a lot of stuff, a very high supply, there is almost always a low cost of it. If there's a lot of stuff, it doesn't cost a lot. If there's not a lot of things, sometimes, if people want it, that's the demand, there is a high cost. So the concept of scarcity directly leads to the concept of price and value. Now, two interesting things I want to mention about resources. If I were asking you and gave you enough time, I would say, what is the most precious resource? Think about it. Is it gold? Is it iron? Is it oil? That's expensive, although I tell you oil is not actually that expensive. When you think about it, people always say gas is expensive. It's really not. Isn't gas almost cheaper than water? Almost, for a gallon of each. Is knowledge the most important resource? Given enough time, I think you or I could create an argument that time is the most precious resource when it is very scarce. When you're young, you have so much time, you don't think about time as a resource. But what would an elder person, towards the end of their life, what would they give any of their other resources for? Ask them, and the answer is almost always more time. How much of my money, how much of my house, how much of my other rental properties, how many of my cats would I give for extra years with my parents? Or extra years of my own time? Time is a very, very important resource. And some would say, I would say, is there any unlimited resource that is just so unlimited it's worthless? And given enough time, which is not unlimited, a student would eventually come up with air. And air is almost breaking the rule of scarcity. Living on the earth, we have all the air we need. Air, because it is unlimited in supply, the air, the cost is free. We don't sell air. But if we look deeper, I would ask you, don't we sell air a little bit? Where is air scarce? Air is scarce where there isn't clean air. See, we got to modify it. It's not just air and oxygen, it's clean air. And then all of a sudden, of course we sell clean air all the time. It doesn't come in a can. It doesn't come in the clean air bar. Although when I went to Vegas to visit my sister and her family, I did actually see people in the casinos paying for air. They had flavored air with things stuck into their nose as they were breathing flavored air, and they paid for it. I'm like, what are you doing? And it turns out they are breathing flavored air and paying for it. So of course we do cost unbelievable. No, but I am thinking of filtration devices. Don't we have furnace filters that cost money? Don't we have air purifiers that cost money? We pay for clean air. And ask the people in currently California with the wildfires and in some of the most polluted cities. I think a couple years ago, Beijing and Mexico City were at the top lists of polluted cities. What do those people in those cities want? What are they willing to pay for? And the answer is clean air. So truly, I can think of every resource has this concept of scarcity, and the more scarce and the more it's demanded, the more value it has. Okay, to finish up resources, there is something that happens that is different than scarcity. It is called a shortage. A shortage is very simply a temporary lack of a resource, good, or service. Okay, where usually there is enough of something like bottled water. There's enough to fulfill the demand of people. During a natural disaster, everyone wants bottled water and or recently toilet paper, and so there becomes a shortage. The supply chain cannot handle the demand. Now, shortage is not scarcity because there is all toilet paper is scarce. There's not unlimited toilet paper or bottled water. Okay, that's a concept, but a temporary couple month or couple week shortage is when it's gone for a small amount of time. Now is a great time to pause, collect your thoughts, make sure you have some things written down because I'm going to go into a different concept in 1 second. Feel free to pause. Okay, that definition of economics, the simple version, is absolutely totally fine. I'm going to go into a textbook definition a little bit more in depth. Feel free to listen. It is not necessary to memorize this one. It just goes into the idea, the field, a little bit more. So economics is the study of, okay? It is a social science, but it's also a human condition. There is no society ever created that existed that doesn't have economics. So I'm expanding it. It's not the study of something. It exists, okay? It is part of the human condition since the beginning of humans. So the human condition of how people, societies, businesses use their resources and make choices to fulfill their limited needs and unlimited wants. It just adds a little more flavor to the definition. And now I want to get a little bit more philosophical with my thoughts on economics because it is so important, I think, as one of the primordial fundamental aspects of humanity that I want to bring economics into the philosophical realm for a second. Absolutely unimportant to understand this. It is at an incredibly deep level. Stick with the basics if you want. Otherwise, keep on listening. At the heart, when you dig down to the deepest part of economics, it's the logical process of making decisions. All decisions we make, if we think about it, are based on economics. I'm not talking about instinctual decisions. I'm not talking about you put your hand on a hot burner and you immediately pull it off. I'm not saying when you're overcome with emotions and you start making decisions. I'm not saying when you automatically do make a decision on instinct and you don't even think about it. That's not economics. But as soon as you start putting in logical thought, you are considering the consequences. You are considering your needs and your wants. You are considering how to use your scarce resources to make the decisions to improve your life, to increase what they call your utility, your satisfaction in life. So as soon as you bring your brain into it and start considering options, even if it's to help someone or not help someone, it's not about making money. It's creating options that will increase your satisfaction in life. Thinking decisions in every time is part of economics. It is, in my opinion, so fundamental to the human condition. It is not the only way you make decisions. And I did say when you act on instinct or on emotions, you are not engaging in economics. No. But as soon as you start using that brain, you are involved in economic thought. So if you want to fully engage in the lesson, pause the video, and in the space below your notes, continuing on, if you have to go to another page, go to another page. If you have space in your notes below, use that space. Pause the recording and come up with necessities that you think are needed for acceptable survival in our area. Okay? I have come up with around 10. Challenge yourself to come up with a couple, and then we'll go over the ones that I and other students have come up with over the years. Okay? If you want to play along, pause the video, write a few down, and I'll be back. So let's take a look at some of the necessities. Most everybody agrees on the necessities on the top of the line, to the extent that you cannot survive if you don't have shelter. You don't have shelter in the area, you will die during the winter. Okay, you need food or sustenance. Food, water. Without it, you will die. That's biology. Clothes. In this area, you cannot survive with clothes. To be fair and to give credit to psychology, they have proven that you do need some sort of entertainment. Now, that entertainment can be very minimal and you can come up with it yourself, but you do need it. And to almost a 99.9%, humans do need some sort of companionship / social. Now, this might change with age, but it is. There are studies with young monkeys, and I'm not sure which version of monkeys, will literally just not survive if they don't have the companionship of a mother when they're a baby, or it doesn't even have to be their mother. It could be, look up the study. It's literally a thing wrapped in fuzz, and the baby monkeys use it as companionship. It's a very impressive study, showing the need of at least one or two or social interaction. Now, below the line, my definition, because I firmly support the idea of necessities being acceptable survival. We live in a country and an area where there is no reason to not go for an acceptable level of food. You can survive by picking food out of a garbage. I have a video of that in the Philippines from 6 years ago. There was a problem, and I hope it's getting better. It was garbage chicken, and that is a necessity, food for sustenance, but that is not acceptable to me. I need food without parasites. I need food that doesn't make us sick, okay? Acceptable survival. Because we're in the real world, so if you're thinking of your necessities, you're going to have to think of what you need to not just live, but to thrive and to get by in a better way. So I put healthcare. That is a necessity in where we are. A phone and internet, I believe, is a necessity for navigating a job. Grooming and hygiene. Try to sustain your job without hygiene or grooming. Education, to some degree you need education. Otherwise you will be living less an unacceptable survival. You need some sort of training. And I would say a functioning government. Some student brought that up, and I agree. We need a functioning government for acceptable survival. Whenever a government does not function or is totally dysfunctioned, the people are not surviving very well. This knowledge of necessities, it seems basic, and it seems like everyone knows it, but it is one of the most powerful tools for establishing financial stability. There are two reasons that people do not have the money and stability they want in our area. One reason is lack of income. So on one side, you need a good income. And on the second side is too much spending. Good income, low spending. The problem is people seem unwilling to recognize their necessities and spend on their necessities and not spend on their wants. They spend too much money on wants thinking that they need it. So a clear understanding of necessities versus wants will help you control your spending, which is absolutely necessary if you're going to make the equation of financial stability work. And to conclude, the impact of having knowledge about economics. In a personal sense, knowledge of economics will help you achieve financial stability. It will also help you examine your decision making to better make decisions in your life to increase your happiness and further you along towards your goals. And it will help you maximize your life utility. Utility meaning satisfaction. An understanding of economics is, I would say, virtually essential for having financial stability and, quite frankly, possibly happiness in life, satisfaction. As a government or a business, economics is very important to decide what we as a country produce, how we produce it, and for whom we produce it. Different governments will have different amounts of goods, types of goods, availability of wealth and goods and services. And you can see governments can really screw up their economies, and certain types of governmental economies lead to starvation, they lead to stagnant growth, and other types of economies lead to innovation, wealth, prosperity, healthcare. So it is essential for governments to make maximum economic choices to produce utility for their country and people. All right. Thanks for watching.